Hey folks, this is Kalani. It's been a busy week for WoW so far. We may now know when the pre-patch for Midnight will start up, how long it will last, and when the Midnight expansion itself will launch. There were quite a few unannounced changes to Legion Remix that buff up some of the lesser used artifact traits. There are some big updates on the Midnight Alpha, including our first look at the new prey system and feature, and the Midnight Beta will be starting up soon to give even more players an early look at how the expansion is shaping up. There's a lot to talk about, so let's break it all down in this week's WoW News video. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit on that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's kick things off with some sneaky, unannounced changes that could change up which artifact traits people are running in Legion Remix. Call of the Forest now grants 5% attack and casting speed per stack, up from 3%, and that will last for 15 seconds, up from 10. Waking Frenzy's duration was almost doubled up to 20 seconds, and Dreamweaving duration was increased up to 12 seconds. Naran's Everdisc can now bounce up to 5 times, and the damage increase was buffed up to 60% on every throw, and Arcane Inspiration now increases haste for 16 seconds, up from 10. The disc itself is still kind of annoying to use though, and with how often it just disappears or gets stuck in the environment, I imagine most folks would still opt not to use this ability, even if it did do the most potential damage. Now Tempest's Wrath damage was increased by 33%, it deals damage over 12 seconds, up from 9, and increases by 8% per enemy struck, up from 5%. Thunderstruck now lasts for 20 seconds after Tempest Wrath, up from 15. And then for Vindicator's Judgment, that now lasts for 24 seconds, up from 15, and deals damage or heals for 12 seconds in the area. And then Flight of the Valkyr now blesses allies for 12 seconds, up from 8. I'm not sure duration increases will tip the scales too much when it comes to group content specifically. Everything already dies incredibly quickly, so I doubt you're going to get the full 24 seconds out of Vindicator's Judgment most of the time. Now even with most of these changes in place, I'm not sure anything will come close to the burst potential of Twisted Crusade, especially as everything will just keep getting faster and faster as more players gear up and unlock more infinite power in their artifacts. I think we're also at the point where it almost doesn't matter that much anymore. Your artifact and item level is going to carry your throughput almost no matter what artifact trait you decide to run with nowadays, and Twisted Crusade is incredibly easy to use. But at least the dev team are still trying to get the artifact choices a bit closer to each other in terms of power. Now moving on, we have a whole bunch of updates for the Midnight expansion to go over. To start with, the housing system has seen quite a few ups and downs recently. Some folks on the alpha noticed that with the current room and decor limit, our houses would be limited to pretty small affairs and setups. In fact, some of the previews of the housing system wouldn't actually be feasible as they would go over the placement limits quite considerably. Well, you'd be glad to know that in this week's alpha build, both the room placement budget and the interior decor budgets were massively increased. So the room placement budget went from 9 to 24 depending on house level up to 19 to 43. So you're going to start with double the previous budget and you end up at almost double of the max budget as well. That means we'll be able to place way more rooms and create some really fun layouts as you work through the housing levels. The interior decor budgets were increased even further from 300 to 825, depending on house level again, all the way to 910 as your starting budget. So the starting budget is actually higher than the previously capped out budget now, and then when you get to house level 5, your decor budget explodes up to above 2000. So we'll be able to place a lot of things around our houses with these updated budgets in play. This week's alpha build also gave us our first look at the prey system and how it's shaping up so far. It's definitely interesting and it gives open world players more to do for sure, with some pretty decent rewards on offer. You'll choose your prey target using this bounty board in Silvermoon City. You do have to be at the board or table to pick up a target by the looks of things, so you'll be returning to Silvermoon after each successful hunt, which will create a lot of back and forth, but at least you'll have a reason to be in Silvermoon most of the time. There are 3 difficulties that we know of so far: normal, hard, and nightmare. You're going to start out with just normal, and as you complete hunts and quests, you're going to unlock hard and nightmare later on. The higher difficulties will offer better rewards, as you might expect, but you'll start to get these torment affixes which apply to you while you're out in the world. Things like stacking extra damage, ghost mobs spawning and chasing you, and the main prey NPC telling you to kill something in the next 20 seconds, or you'll just take a bunch of damage. And generally, they're just going to make playing in the open world more annoying, if not a bit more difficult. Right now we have access to up to 12 hunts at a time, one of each difficulty for each of the 4 midnight zones. It looks like these will probably be weekly, so when you've unlocked the higher difficulties you'll have 12 prey targets per week. This is still alpha though, so everything is still subject to change. Normal prey targets are going to reward you with adventurer gear, hard prey targets reward you with veteran gear, and nightmare will reward you with champion gear. You'll also get some currency and some crests to help upgrade your gear too, so that'll give you another repeatable source of champion gear and crests if you can clear nightmare prey targets. Now when it comes to actually hunting your target, this works a bit differently than what I was expecting. It's more or less a fill up the bar, except the bar is hidden. Taking part in the open world content like world quests, killing rares or opening treasures will give you some anguish, and there are prey specific objectives on your map as well that contribute, just in case you've already done all the other world content. In these prey-specific areas, you can find traps that leave behind little orbs of anguish, and it doesn't really matter what you do from this list or the kind of content you want to take part in, you just need to collect anguish in one way or another. When you have enough anguish, your little crystal in the middle of your screen will start to glow, giving you a low chance, then a high chance, and then a guaranteed chance to find your target. So some prey hunts might be a bit faster than others if you find them sooner, but the general gameplay loop will be the same. Pick up your prey target from Silvermoon, go to that zone, do open world content or prey objectives if you run out of world quests and rares, find your target and then go kill them. The ambushing is the part that works differently from what I was expecting. Whenever you're in combat out in the world, your prey target can sometimes just appear and start attacking you. They can use some pretty nasty abilities too, so if you're in the middle of a large pull, or you're fighting a rare or something a bit more difficult, that ambush can kill you pretty quickly. But you cannot kill your target during an ambush. You just get them to about half health and then they retreat, which gives you some extra tracking progress. That means you actually have to fight off your target multiple times before you're allowed to actually kill them. Now it is worth noting that you can get these special traps that will one-shot an ambushing prey target, so if you have any traps on you, you can immediately end an ambush in case you're already in a bit of a pickle, or if you just want to speed up the prey process overall. Now what this system does best is getting you into the open world and giving you another reason to clear through some of the open world content that usually gets left behind rather quickly. You can hit 2 birds with 1 stone and feel good about getting that champion gear at the end, and if you want a bit more of a challenge in the open world, this should tick that box pretty well. The main problem I see with this system is that the current torments or affixes could cause a lot of frustration. The stacking damage increase one especially isn't very fun to deal with because it stacks up every minute, so the longer you spend in the open world, the more damage you're going to take, and the only reliable way to clear that is to die. So if you take too long, you will eventually just get one shot by random mobs out in the world, and then when you come back to life, that's going to start stacking up again. But then there's also a torment that reduces your tracking progress for your prey target whenever you die. So if you get those two together, it's just going to make the whole thing take quite a bit longer. What's kind of funny is that as a paladin, I could bubble those debuffs off, or any debuff related to the prey system actually, so there is going to be quite a bit of disparity between classes and specs. I can also see melee struggling a bit more with things like the ghost monsters or the timer to kill a monster, or some prey targets abilities are also very melee unfriendly, but that's kinda par the course these days. I also think that any class that doesn't have great self-sustain will also start to struggle a lot more than say tanks or hybrid specs with decent self-heals. As I said earlier, getting ambushed can kill you very quickly. I guess maybe that's the point, and not having a good response to all that extra damage coming in will leave you dead more often than not. This could also lead to prey hunting in a party being much easier and more efficient, which is still largely the case with delves, so if you want to strictly play solo, this system could be even harder to progress through. I actually think that the Legion Remix World Tier system was a better way of introducing difficulty to the open world, and having the Hard and Nightmare prey targets only be available in a Hard or Nightmare World Tier could be a more interesting implementation. But those are our first thoughts on the system, and this is the very first week it's been available to test, so a lot could change by the time the expansion goes live. We'll go over the entire system in more detail in a dedicated video later on, so if you're interested in the prey system and how it all works, be sure to keep your eyes peeled for that video. And then the last major update I want to highlight for Midnight this week is that we'll actually have different tier set token class combinations in Midnight. Instead of sharing with the usual suspects like paladins, priests and shamans sharing tier tokens, in Midnight it looks like they're going to be based on armor class. The tier tokens themselves have the armor class in the name too, so it should be super easy to see which one you're going to want to roll on without having to remember if you're Zenith or Mystic. So all cloth wearers will share a tier token, all leather wearers share one, all mail wearers on another, and then the platies should have their own, but right now it still lists warrior, rogue, monk and evoker, so that probably just hasn't been updated yet. This will be an upgrade for some classes, moving to 3 competitors down from 4, but then obviously those leather wearers aren't going to be too happy going up to 4 classes if they used to be on a token with just 3, and I imagine there are going to be a lot more demon hunters floating around with their new specialization coming in Midnight. This should make it easier to keep track of in general though. In other news, we also have some very interesting dates from recent data mining of the alpha, which could give us a better idea of when the Midnight expansion will launch. The first new info we have is for the Midnight pre-patch event. The splash screen was data mined, which included the text, "Cultist activity is on the rise. Something sinister approaches. Available January 27th. This kind of text appeared in the War Within pre-patch splash screen as well, and the pre-patch went live a week before the actual event part started up. So with this splash screen giving us a date of January 27th, that points towards the pre-patch itself going live on January 20th, or at the very least, sometime before January 27th. Now, we don't have a lot of information about what the pre-patch event will include. We know that it will lead us into the assault on the Sunwell that we saw in the Midnight cinematic, but that's about it. The splash screen does say that neighborhood endeavors will be available at this time, so we won't see those with the initial launch of the housing system in patch 11.2.7, I guess, and then the Devourer Demon Hunter specialization, as well as the huge class overhauls, will be included in the pre-patch too. So you'll have plenty of time to get used to the pared down rotations and toolkits we'll have to work with for the Midnight expansion. What's even more interesting is that the pre-patch event timers may have been data mined as well. There are some unnamed world events that run from January 27th up until March 9th, so if the data mined splash screen is accurate, the pre-patch event kicks off on January 27th, and unless there's another world event starting up at the exact same time, these data mined events are almost certainly the pre-patch stuff. If the pre-patch event ends on March 9th, like these events do, that lines us up for a Midnight expansion release date of March 10th. If all of that holds true, we're looking at a 6-week pre-patch event length, which kinda makes sense to me. There are a lot of changes happening in this expansion transition, so giving some extra time to iron out any kinks before the actual expansion launches is definitely a good idea. So pre-patch on January 20th, the pre-patch event on January 27th, and Midnight release on March 10th. That's what all of this data mining is pointing towards. Now, there is another date of some importance. We learned this week that the Midnight Beta will start up on November 11th, so we're taking that big step from Alpha into Beta, which is usually when the testing environment is more or less feature complete, and it's more about making sure everything works and is well balanced. We may see some larger changes depending on how things go, but for the most part, the Beta experience is usually what we get when the expansion goes live. The Beta will start off with the expansion introduction, the leveling experience up to 90, and most non-seasonal endgame content, and then in weeks 2 and 3 we'll see raid testing, which will not include the last boss of the Void Spire or the Keldanas raid, so we'll get 2 untested bosses for Season 1 of Midnight, which is very exciting, and then we'll get our first look at the updated transmog system. Mythic plus dungeon testing will start up, and we'll be able to test housing endeavors. So there's quite a few new systems or features that we haven't been able to see so far in the alpha coming in beta, which is quite exciting. I'm surprised we haven't seen the transmog update specifically yet. That does seem to be a pretty big deal for this expansion, so I'm looking forward to that. Now remember that anyone who pre-purchased the Epic Edition will be invited to the Midnight Beta guaranteed, so if you want to see any of this stuff a bit earlier than launch day, that is one way of going about it. I personally don't think it's worth it just for the beta, but that is going to be up to you at the end of the day. But that's all of the updates we have to go over, so that's it for this week's WoW News video. What do you think of the potential Datamined release date for the Midnight expansion, and how do you feel about Midnight as a whole right now? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can find links in the description or click the join button just below the video. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful in any way, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're always kept up to date. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.